7:30 to it, everyone. TJ Wingard here with you with another episode of Beyond the Tape. And today we're going to go ahead and review my 12 biggest winners from day one of the Combine testing. You know, it's kind of tough to say that. It's not really it's not the first day of the Combine, but it's the first day of testing. And so that means we're talking about defensive line and linebackers. I'm giving you 12 names. There's plenty more who tested out really well yesterday. But some of the names I picked out were, hey, this guy needs to be a good athlete, and he showcased that. And some of these guys, it's like, hey, this is a different weight, and the numbers are great. Or, whoa, this guy's a better athlete, more explosive than maybe I thought. So these are just the 12 names I wanted to bring to the table. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section or in a reply back to this post if you're watching on X. So let me hear your thoughts on the biggest Combine winners. Let's jump into it. And we're starting on a bit of an obvious note here. It's Shemar Stewart. He posted the first 10 of the year. So, yeah, pretty safe to say that's going to get you on the list. 267 pounds was the interesting note for Shemar. You know, he was 280 at the Senior Bowl. And that's about, what he's listed at I think it was at 290 at one point at A&M. Then it was, spring weight at 285. So it's kind of matriculated its way down. But nevertheless, for him to show, hey, this kind of goes into my theory about A&M and why Scorton's production was down a little bit. Why Shemar Stewart, only 1.5 sacks last year. I really do think Elko put a priority on guys that could win with, power and one of these guys to bulk up, be good run defenders, but also rush with good lane integrity, which you want every edge rusher to do. But really felt like that was an emphasis for them, and maybe that's part of why the production was a little bit lower for these guys. So it was cool to see Shemar Stewart, shave off some weight and say, you want a prototypical NFL edge? Here I am, 267, and then you see the 40-yard dash, the 20-yard split, the 10-yard split, all elite, the vertical, the broad, all fantastic. And I am using RES, shout out to MathBomb on X, definitely give him a follow. Check out and keep up with the Combine testing as we go. They also give you good comps here. So this is just from an athletic standpoint, but yeah, anytime you're top 3 athletic measurables are Javon Curse, the guy whose nickname was The Freak, Myles Garrett, who is our iteration of that in this current era, and then Jadeveon Clowney, who was a monster, number 1 overall pick. So you're putting yourself in that type of status. That's a good place to be. Shemar Stewart was the top 10 player on my board coming into the week, so he's not really going to move up, but if you're only going to have 1.5 sacks and be touted as freak athlete, a 10 on the RES score goes a long way. All right, let's get on to number 2, Jihaad Campbell. And he was a guy with a ton of hype coming into this one. He's going to light it up, all that sort of stuff. Freaky athlete. I think good height. The weight's fine. I'm fine with 235. I'm not too worried about that, but that does kind of knock it down to good. But you see 9.95 overall RES score, 40-yard, 10-yard, 10-yard, 20-yard, all fantastic. The broad's elite as well. So just an explosive athlete who flies all around the field, but also not just is he flying around with straight line speed, he can get going, man. You see that acceleration, 9.86, and this is out of 1 to 10, so you could almost just move the decibel over, 98.6 percentile. You can kind of use that as a general ballpark. That's elite stuff when it comes to starting and getting into, an explosive first step. And some comps here, not a whole lot of names that are going to really wow you, especially when the last one's Jamin Davis and he's a bit of a first round bust, but he was drafted in the first round because he was a freaky athlete. So do take that into account. And Stutzman, spoiler alert here, we'll talk about him in just a little bit. It's also going to be interesting to compare these to what this all would look like an edge as we get further into this draft cycle. There's going to be more and more of that conversation. Is Jihaad Campbell an edge, or should he play off ball? I like him an off ball and being utilized as a blitzer. I think he's just comparing him to, this is weird because Jalen Walker's ranked higher on my board. But when it comes to the off ball linebacker stuff, I think Campbell's way further advanced than Walker is, in my opinion, while also being an awesome blitzer. So that's why I say keep him off ball, and he is my off ball linebacker 1. And then we get to Landon Jackson, man. So good arm length, 9.88 overall RAS, good height, 264. I think, Arkansas, he probably was at 270. I think that's fine. 264 is not too big of a deal either, especially when you are, 6'6". I'm not too worried about that. The vertical and the broad really is what kind of caught my attention because, with the Senior Bowl, there were some one-on-ones where it's all right, there's a little something there, but it's mostly winning with arm length and power. But he was an awesome run defender there. So I was all right, kind of same old Landon Jackson, good second-round guy, high floor. We'll see what we can do because he does have a unique build. You can build on that pass rush profile. And then you go out there and, 9.93 composite score in the vertical, 40.5 inches. That's awesome. The broad, 10.9. That's fantastic. And now you're starting to look at him. It's okay, we'll have to go back and check the tape. What does that first step look like? So, maybe I should have done a little bit more of that. 40-yard dash is the sexy thing here because it's straight line speed and who doesn't want to be the fastest there? But 10-yard split is measuring, acceleration, how quick you can hit your top speed. 20-yard split, I think, kind of a little bit more of that, but also maintaining that speed. And then vertical and broad, especially for guys on the defensive side, it's explosiveness, first step juice. So this changes the profile a little bit for me with Landon Jackson. He's definitely going to be a guy where I have to go back and just watch that initial first step. Because if he is this work in progress as a pass rusher, but you can get him on the field because he's a great run defender, but now you're telling me he has that first step juice, it's that much easier to get him down on the field, get him some reps on passing situations too. So very interesting profile there, really good explosive numbers. I think that's also part of the reason you get down to 264, a little bit easier to get up there and get an explosive broad jump as well. 40-yard dash was good though. 20-yard split, a little bit better than the 10, so you can see where he's gaining that speed in that second set of 10 versus the first set, but also the first set, it's not the end of the world when you're 6'6", 264. The get up speed can be a little tough, but you see it in that first step. With Landon Jackson, which is really, really interesting. Anytime, Shane Merriman is popping up on your screen, absolute monster in his prime. So that's a fun one. I'm a Notre Dame fan too. So like a Justin Tuck comparison, especially with his height, that's kind of interesting. Because Tuck was this long, bendy, kind of finesse winner, but Landon Jackson, this run defender. So that's kind of interesting. But again, this is just from an athletic standpoint where the numbers match up, not a play style comparison for a lot of these guys. But really good day for Landon Jackson. I think, he's been kind of teetering towards maybe the third round of my latest mocks, but I think, after yesterday, he's going to be a round 2 lock for me, for sure. And how about this? Ty Robinson. He was a really good player at the Senior Bowl and a player I really enjoyed watching. And the more that he was out on the field, especially like by day 3, I was like, dude, Ty Robinson is just kind of the man. Really fun player to watch. Really, really athletic defensive tackle. And I mean, that sounds kind of like duh or like, layman scouting, but you watch him at Nebraska and you're like, for a guy who's, 288 pounds and, maybe a little bit bigger when he was at Wisconsin, because here I think he probably shed a little bit weight too, get some of these explosive combine numbers that you see on your screen. But I'd be willing to say he was probably right at 300 or so while playing at Nebraska. But you still see a guy with good first step, but also very light on his feet and can read and react, stack and shed blocks very quickly. The hands move well for someone that big too. So he's not like, Kenneth Grant big, but I think he was a little bit bigger than 288. But other than that weight, that's really the only mark on the profile. And ultimately, I think he's going to be playing closer to 300 anyways. So, you could probably shave off a little bit of the time, a little bit of the vertical and broad because he is going to gain some weight. But nevertheless, for a guy who is really athletic on tape, this was a great confirmation. Yep, good first step. You see it in the vertical and the broad. Yeah, he's got speed to chase down quarterbacks. You saw that at the Senior Bowl. There was a pressure from Robinson and then a pick from Tommy Hill, just a good rep there from Nebraska. And it was, that's that closing speed. So you kind of see that with the 40-yard dash as well. And then he was one of the few guys who actually did the athletic drill. And the shuttle's huge for offensive line and defensive line. So, an 8.68 right there in the shuttle at 4.5, that's a good spot to be. And I think it's an okay 3 cone for someone who, is 288 pounds too. The other thing is 288 is not even, that's, like Aeneas Peebles is lighter than that. So there's going to be other defensive tackles that are even lighter who also kind of fit that, athletic guy. But I think Ty Robinson brings more as a run defender than some of those other lighter guys. So going ahead and looking at some of the comps, Taven Bryan, not necessarily the best one. Keon White, defensive end. And, I think that's ultimately, maybe that's really the main takeaway here. Ty Robinson might become poor man's version of Alfred Collins in a lot of ways for this draft class, where it's he's a good run defender and we can move him all across the line, right? Alfred Collins can play the 5, the 3, and he can play some nose. Ty Robinson, maybe not nose at 288 pounds. If you get him to 300, maybe you could. But, let's just say he gets back to 293. Let's just split the difference. He's a guy who gives you some 3 and 5 tech versatility here with this athletic profile. So maybe that's the main takeaway here for Ty Robinson, but a great day for him out of the initial scouting. And then Kane Medrano, but really impressed with him. And he was one that, I don't want to talk about the on-field drills for everyone because ultimately you're kind of running around and you're going to look good. But there is one guy towards the end of this that was really catching my eye. But another one was Kane Medrano. I was really fluid athlete. And, hands up, most of the time I'm watching UCLA. I've been doing it for Femi Oladejo and Carson Schwessinger. But Kane Medrano has someone that will occasionally catch your eye just because he is not quite like Schwessinger, not like a heat-seeking missile to the ball, but flies around the field like his hair's on fire. And the athletic testing really confirms that. 9.9 composite score in the 40-yard dash, that's fantastic. The 10-yard split's also, elite. The vertical, the broad, you see an explosive athlete. It's just going to come down to how do you feel about 222 pounds. And again, some of that is maybe he played closer to 230 at UCLA, but he wants to trim down and get, an even better athletic testing numbers, but also good frame too. It's, a good height at least, 6'2". So he's going to be an interesting build. You're probably going to need to add more weight to him. but as one of these off-ball linebackers you can take later on in the draft, especially in a zone-heavy scheme where you're just trying to get some guys who can fly around in space, fly to the football, he becomes an interesting kind of day 3 prospect. So I think he definitely made himself some money yesterday. And then, looking at the comps, nothing really to write home about there, but I was really impressed with Caden Medrano, and it just felt like a guy that I kept being like, he keeps really impressing me as you get into the on-field drills, which doesn't always happen. Danny Stutzman, the other linebacker, and the other guy I wanted to talk about, and he's another one of these dudes, middle linebacker from Oklahoma, that just, again, plays like his hair is on fire, just flying around the field. Really fun watch, hard hitter. Combine testing was going to be a good confirmation for how good of an athlete he is. Is it just, he flies around the field like a maniac, or is he actually just like an NFL caliber athlete? I think this basically confirms, he's an NFL caliber athlete. He's still not my favorite off-ball linebacker. But nevertheless, the vertical could have been a little bit better, but good height. The weight's okay. Again, probably trimmed down just to get some better athletic testing. But the 40, the 20, the 10, those were all really good numbers. So I think that was good confirmation for the type of player you see flying around on the field for Oklahoma. We saw his name up earlier, but Jahad Campbell, I think Campbell had the better day for sure. And I don't think he's quite the same player as Edgerrin Cooper either. And I don't think he has quite the length and size that Cooper does. Peyton Wilson honestly might be like the fairest kind of comp. Wilson came with a bunch of injury concerns, and I don't think you really get that with Danny Stutzman. So, pretty solid day and a really athletic linebacker that backed that up with his testing numbers yesterday. All right, let's get back to the defensive line. James Pierce Jr., man. If you watch him, you see, whoa, this guy looks a little thin, and you see that 245 is not actually a terrible weight. That's a little bit bigger than I thought he would be, to be honest. I think when you watch the 2023 Tennessee tape, he looks almost like a safety out there. He's like 230-something. And then this year, I was like, he probably got up to 240. But I kind of figured, with the combine testing, I wouldn't be shocked if he's 238, maybe 240 on the dot. So 245, it's still 17.5 percentile. That's pretty crazy. But for him, I don't think that's too bad. And Marcus Mosher from a variety of places tweeted out yesterday, top 10. You take the guys who finished top 10 in the league last year in sacks. Their average weight was 252 pounds. So Pierce isn't too far off from that, so I'm not too concerned. 6'5", really good frame. The broad jump's fantastic. The vertical's a little concerning, but the broad, you see it with his first step. So ultimately, I'm going to take that away. And, maybe that's confirmation bias on how I see the player, but vertical a little concerning, but the broad I think backs up what I see on tape with that first step juice. And then the 40-yard dash, he flies around the field. He'll drop into coverage and make some plays too. So just an overall great athlete. 9.66 score on the 10-yard split at 158. First step juice, getting around the corner. He's got great natural bend. So with how he plays and the athleticism, the explosiveness, and the speed he put on display, he's not going to make it out of the top 20, it doesn't feel like at this point. Jermaine Johnson actually really is kind of a fun comp. I think Johnson was a little bit heavier when he came out, but Kayvon Thibodeau is another one of these kind of freaky athletes you could have as a solid comp. I don't hate that whatsoever. Again, I think maybe a little bit bigger, but I have to go back and double check. But nevertheless, James Pierce Jr., you think about speed, you think about explosive athlete, and he certainly showcased that yesterday. All right, let's get on to another one of these guys who crushed at the Senior Bowl, Darius Alexander, top 5 interior defensive lineman for yours truly. And man, he's going to be in the top 50 on my big board, man. He is just such a fun player to watch. A little on the older side, but he comes move-in ready. I like the height. The weight's fine, 305. That's exactly what it is at the Senior Bowl, so that clearly seems to be his comfortable weight. Vertical, really good numbers. Broad, even better. 40-yard dash was a really good time for 305 pounds, so I am totally comfortable with that. 10-yard split, yeah, sure. Would you like to get it to 1.6 something? Sure, but it's okay. Again, over 300 pounds, I'm okay with that. 8.0, I think that's solid enough. Considering, again, you're getting a guy who 25 but has electric hands. Hands that move almost as fast as anybody else in this class. Like Mason Graham and him, kind of like the first two that come to mind when it comes to quick hands in this class. And a good first step, power behind the punch, like a wide array of moves he can use. Again, he comes move-in ready. The agility stuff's not great. The 3-cone's not terrible, too. So you see that a little bit of the bend and kind of natural athleticism, ability to get underneath tackles. And that kind of backs up, what we saw at the Senior Bowl where he was moving all across the defensive line. He wasn't just playing on the interior. So you could move him out wide and try to get a little bit of, hip flexion in there and try to get him underneath some of those offensive tackles. And then the shuttle wasn't great. So that's not awesome. But other than that, I thought it was a really, really solid day put together by Darius Alexander. He continues to rise up draft boards. All right. Next guy to talk about here, CJ West, a big winner out of the Shrine Bowl, showcased good leverage. Arms are a little bit shorter, but just sawed off despite that, and rock solid. pound for pound strength that will really impress you. Throw in the fact that he's 316 pounds. So yeah, this is your like middle of the defensive line, nose tackle, no nonsense run stopper. And then you throw in the fact that, hey, that 40-yard dash, 20-yard split, 10-yard split, and actually a really solid vertical. There might be more in that first step than I initially saw it. And there might be some pass rush juice to be had there. Now, when I watch this team out of Indiana, I don't see like a wide array of moves or anything like that. Again, I see a guy with, powerful hands who will, punch the living daylights out of you, and he's great against the run. But now I'm looking at this athletic profile and I'm saying, hey, CJ West, that 4th round flyer that you thought, hey, he's just going to be our early downs guy. There might be more to mold there, but again, the big concern really is this arm length, sub 32-inch arms. That's not great. But I will say defensive tackle, if you get good leverage, and honestly, this is a negative on the chart, but if you're going to have sawed-off arms, I actually don't really mind it just because you're going to naturally get underneath guys, and I feel like that's a good way of counteracting the arm length. Now, the real sweet spot would have been, add 2 inches of arm length to this guy and get him underneath, which actually one of the next guys we're going to talk about here is that exact same mold, that Elvis Dumervil, Brandon Graham type of build where leverage, king, and long arms, that would have been ideal. But West is a little bit more sawed off, but he's a great athlete. Showcased some good acceleration at the line right there with a good explosive number in the vertical. Javon Hargrave's kind of an interesting node. Early on in his Pittsburgh career was a really good run defender. Went to Philly, and all of a sudden he becomes this great pass rusher, and that's what the 49ers paid him for. So I think that's kind of an interesting guy for him to be compared to, at least from an athletic standpoint. And really, if you're CJ West, that would be really kind of the career path, right? Get drafted as this run defender, but I'm going to showcase some more. I do think Hargrave had longer arms. That would be the big difference between the two. All right, let's get to Donovan Ezeiruaku, one of my favorite players in the draft. And if you follow me on X, I was retweeting posts from guys like Trevor Sikkema, who like him a ton too, and they're saying, hey, this guy should be talked about in the first round. And I certainly think that's live, right? The Eagles at 32 could make some sense. Hell, the Chiefs, depending on what they want to do. I could see them bringing back some of their old guys like Ibukam, who might be a free agent and stuff like that. But Ezeiruaku, right, if you're ready to move on from Felix Anudike-Uzomah, the Bills could be an interesting spot. The Ravens could use to add another edge rusher. So you get to the back half of the first round, it's like, oh, dude, Ezeiruaku, he could go off the board at any moment. But if not then I think, honestly, the Patriots' second round pick, I don't know if he gets past that pick. So really fun player, and he's going to go somewhere in that, what feels like 25 to 40 range for me. But one of my favorite players in this class. Good hand size. Again, the arm length is fantastic. It was 34.5 inches at the Senior Bowl, so I don't know what happened to that half inch, but nevertheless, still great arm length for someone who is on the shorter side, 6'2". But again, 6'2", we're talking Elvis Dumervil here, who was 6'1", but had freaky long arms. So, very similar from that standpoint. The weight, 248 pounds, but again, I go back to the Marcus Mosher tweet. Top 10 guys in sacks this year, combined weight of 252 pounds. Football, linebacker and, edge rusher, they're getting lighter but more explosive. So Ezeiruaku kind of fits that. But again, the arm length to me really does counter that because weight matters a lot against the run, but also the point of attack, who dictates the action. And 34-inch arms is going to help Ezeiruaku dictate the action. Great vertical, love the broad. And then the agility drills too, sub 7-second 3-cone, you love to see that. He's a guy that to me, I saw the arm length right away. It looks like he has pterodactyl wings. But I didn't really hear anybody saying he's a really good athlete, good first step, and very natural bend. But that's how I described him. I was he's not just long arms; he's got that stuff too. And I think this just backs it up. So good confirmation for my eyes right there. But big fan of Donovan Ezeiruaku. And what's funny? His head coach at Boston College. I wonder if the name's going to be on here. It's not. Harold Landry is actually another good, Boston College, kind of comparison. But I think honestly, I like Ezeiruaku more than I like Landry coming out of BC. But Bill O'Brien, his head coach at Boston College, has been comparing him to former Houston Texan that Bill O'Brien coached, Whitney Mercilus. So I was kind of interested to see if Mercilus would be on here, but I think that's a fun comparison as well. So another name to throw out there, but yep, Donovan Ezeiruaku continues to make himself good money. Now let's get on to David Walker. Here is your kind of Brandon Graham-ish. The arm length, I wish it could have gotten up to 32, a little bit longer, but ultimately, it's right there. So I'm not too worried about it. And then you can see the height. The height is definitely the big concern here. That is a very, very low number. But it's Brandon Graham-esque, right? 6 foot long arms and wins with power. Power and leverage. Get underneath guys and then shoving it in their chest and then turn their face a little bit. But that's kind of what I see here with David Walker. I wish he was a little bit more athletic, because then you could get the Dumerville here kind of comparison, right? Like, he didn't have the bend that Dumerville had, but Dumerville would also uplift people too, like forklift people, and that's kind of what Brandon Graham is to me. So yeah, ultimately, in James Foster from 33rd team before that, A to Z Sports, I believe, he's kind of the one that was kind of pounding the table for the Brandon Graham comparison, and I think he's spot on it with it, and he's a great draft analyst, so shout out to him. But other than the height and the weights, 263, again, I'm not going to keep talking about it. It's fine. It's just not going to wow you. But a good vertical. Wish the broad was a little better, but if you have one of these two explosive traits, that's enough for me. Plus the 40 and the 20. I do wish the 10-yard split was a little bit better, but again, power rusher, wins with arm length, wins with power, getting into the guy's chest. There's only so many things. And ultimately, David Walker's still probably like late third, early fourth. So it's not going to be a perfect, fit, and not going to be like all 10s across the board, but you get towards, the late 90s, into the hundreds, I like him a ton, especially if if we get to that point in the draft and the Eagles somehow have a drafted defensive line, again, feels like a great Brandon Graham replacement, but if your team's looking for a power rusher, I think he really does check that box for you, and could be someone that could fill that role without having to spend a first-round pick on that class. Jerry Hughes is kind of an interesting guy to compare him to. Kwity Paye is just a better athlete to me, so because Kwity Paye had like a sub-Devils 3-cone, I think, so Walker, not quite the same type of player, but around the same RAS score, so not too bad. All right, we're going to go on to a different page here, just because, Kent's just, he's working hard and all this, and he just hasn't quite gotten to Oladejo. My boy Femi Oladejo, he was fantastic, and he was the other guy that when I mentioned was crushing the on-field drills, this is the guy that I was like, yeah, dude, Femi Oladejo might be something, because even if you have the TV on pretty low volume, him hitting the pads as he's going by and giving that hook move, it's like, whoa, holy cow, seismic seismic waves coming to my direction from that. Like, really, you can kind of see it from his off-ball linebacker days. Long, powerful athlete with absolute killer punches. Like when he connects with his hands, it's a lot. And you kind of see that and you hear that with the on-field drills yesterday. But also when you look at the athletic testing, also let's talk about arm length. That's fantastic, 260 pounds. He moves very well for 260. And then, no 10-yard, no 40-yard, but pretty explosive, not too bad. And again, someone that just looked really fluid on the on-field drill. So if you're not going to do this, and you're not going to do this, and not doing this, what do you look like in the on-field drill? So that's why, I did keep an eye on the on-field drills, just because not all these guys were competing in the running drills or like the agility drills. But so what do they look like as they're moving out there? And Oladejo is already someone that on the UCLA tape looks like, a fluid athlete, solid. Really, the only knock on him is he's still a work in progress from a pass rush standpoint. He's still figuring out like how to win, what are the moves I'm going to win with, all that sort of stuff. What's a pass rush plan? Can I show a guy this, counter with it later? Right now, he's just kind of winning by out athleting people and out like powering people. But nevertheless, it's working for right now. And then you see him move on the field. He's kind of one of these guys. Mel Kiper Jr. had him sneak in as the late first round pick in his mock that we did a reaction to here on the channel. So if you missed it, definitely check that out. He kind of does become an intriguing. Could he be this year's Peyton Turner, right, and sneak into the late first round? I think it's certainly a possibility. I could have been a little bit nicer to Kiper in that pick there, but he was great at the Senior Bowl. Loved diving into his tape. Still work in progress to me, so I still see him as a second rounder. But now you see him and see how he moves at the combine, plus good, vertical and good broad jump numbers. Maybe that's enough to impress the team to say, hey, you know what, ball of clay. We're going to draft him in the late first. Like the Bills, right? Like Greg Rousseau. They work some magic. Oladejo's not the same player as Rousseau, but Rousseau, young player, comes with a lot of work. They made that happen, and he's become a really good player for them. So could the Bills do something similar? Could the Ravens do something similar? So just something to keep your eyes on. But guys, that is going to do it for my top 12 winners out of day one of the NFL Combine, at least the testing portion of the Combine. We'll be coming back either later tonight or tomorrow morning to talk about day two winners. It's going to be fun talking about defensive backs and tight ends, and there are a ton of crazy athletes at both those positions. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, be sure to follow us here on X, and be sure to keep your eye out for day two Combine winners, either again coming tonight or coming tomorrow. Let me hear your thoughts about some other Combine winners. Who'd I leave off that you think I'm crazy for not talking about here? I'd love to hear your honorable mentions list down below in the comments or in a reply on X. That's going to do it for us. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, we are signing off.